Now that I've ruled out the things I don't want and I've settled on the things I do want for this tote bag of mine, I can start thinking about the mechanics of the bag, how I'm going to weave it, how I'm going to seam it, and then I can proceed on to the next step. So for this stage of the project, we're going to look at just a very simple sketch for however useful this is. I actually do find it often very useful, and I've learned this in my work. If I'm planning a project that has, we're going to call it complex components, more than just I'm weaving a scarf or I'm weaving a run or something that's going to be long and skinny. If I'm going to seam something, if uh, if it's going to have a fringe, if it's got multiple parts, I just draw it out. That saves me a lot of time and effort and keeps me from forgetting big components. For instance, if you're weaving a series of towels and you want to leave enough blank warp in for fringe, I find it useful to go ahead and just write that stuff down, simple though it, ridiculous though it seems, just so I don't forget and miscalculate things. Because as we know, math is not always my friend. All right, so I mentioned that I wanted my finished bag to be 12 inches high and about 30 inches in circumference. I'm actually going to plan for closer to 32 inches in uh, in circumference, so that I've got space for seam allowances. And I already decided this long before I turned the camera on today, that what I wanted was for the top of my bag to be the selvage, because that's the edge that everybody's going to see, and I don't want to hem it unless I can't think of a better solution. Also, my rigid heddle loom is 25 inches wide. So if I want to stick with a rigid heddle loom, which I do for one particular reason, which is it's got less loom waste than my floor loom, it won't fit. I'll, there are alternatives. If I wanted to go to my floor loom, I could flip this around and I could weave 32 inches wide, or actually I'm going to need to allow for shrinkage, which I'll come to in a second. I could weave 32 inches wide uh, and only 12 inches tall, but that is going to create, oh my gosh, so much loom waste for just a tiny amount of warp, that this seems like a more efficient use of my yarn. The alternative, of course, to the other consideration rather to weaving it on my floor loom is, if I turned it around, if I did, this is going to be, this is going to look weird, but if I wove it at 12 inches high, I could actually double weave it and not have side seams, but I would rather have side seams uh, as opposed to weaving a tube. And I think that I really, really, really want a bottom seam. Uh, so this means my rigid heddle loom. And this means the warp's going to be coming off this edge, and this is going to be a selvage, and then this bottom will be a selvage. And I can sew it with one side seam. Though I might honestly create a faux seam on the other side just for the purposes of symmetry. Uh, I will almost certainly decide to do an enclosed seam, basically a French seam. Uh, Depending on how this fabric turns out, it might be so bulky and so fulled that I honestly never, ever, ever have to worry about the raw edges of the seam fraying or catching. I could also decide if things are too bulky, if the fabric's too bulky for French seams, to sew a lining for the bag. All of these things are possible. Um, and I seriously won't know until I create my woven sample and full it. So this means I'm basically going to have, and I'm trying to draw sideways here, and this isn't going to be to scale, a side seam, a faux side seam, a real side seam connecting these two edges, and then a bottom seam. And I can choose to miter the corners uh, for or not. Um, I have found that on a cloth bag, a separately sewn flat base doesn't do much unless I'm going to put some sort of stiffener in there, and I don't want to do that here. So this is going to suit my purposes perfectly. So now let's think about how I'm going to use my colors and allow myself some creative freedom to do something fun with this bag. So because of my yarn amounts, which is to say, and let's pull out my tags here because this will help us. I have got 650 yards of one of the black. And yeah, sorry, I should have grabbed all these tags out of here before I turned on the camera. Then the formerly gray Suffolk, I've got about 500 yards of. And then the Valet black nose, I've got 375 yards of. In other words, I've got about twice as much of the black yarn as I do of the white. Um, Here's what I've decided to do. I want to do a black band, a deep black band at the bottom, and then a white band in here, and then another black band at the top, uh, because once I get done with this, I might decide, for instance, that that white band I want to embroider, I want to needle felt, uh, or I might just want to do something fun in that white area with colors. So you can see on this, and this was just pure accident that I chose a number divisible by 3 when I was sketching things out. I've marked it into thirds, and what I want to do now, or think about doing now, is going just above the 1/3 mark, and this area will be my white, is the plan. So this is going to mean a super, super easy warping project for the sample. I'm going to do one of the black areas in one of my 2 black yarns, and then I'll do the Valet black nose, and then I'll do the other black yarn at the top, just to see how these wools react to the fulling process. See how easy they are to weave. See if I'm going to need to have to pull out my can of Aquanet to control the fuzz and make them not stick to each other, and see how they felt. Because at this point, I seriously don't know, and this means I cannot go any further on this project until I've woven some fabric, wet finished it, and seen how it all played out. So that's going to be my next step. These are coarser wools, and it is much more likely that they won't full felt the way that a softer wool is. But I'm not familiar with any of these breeds, so I just don't know. And the fact that the Anaroons was a skirted roving from I don't even know what breed means I really, really, really have to just sample. So without further ado, I am going to start weaving on my rigid heddle loom, and there's no reason I cannot make a warp as long as what I think I'm going to need for this entire project, uh, just in case all my plotting for the sample, my warping for the sample, turns out to work beautifully and then I don't have to rewarp the loom. So, as I keep saying, I'm going to full this yarn, this fabric to within an inch of its life. And so I am planning for 30% shrinkage after it comes off the loom, which is a huge amount. But I just don't know how it's going to go. So that means, and I already did these calculations, that I want a 16-inch woven width. So I'm probably going to set up the loom for about a 16 and a half, 17-inch weaving width. And then I want to weave 39 inches long, which is just over a yard. So if I do, let's say, 2.5 yard warp, I should have warped the loom in preparation for the sample and the finished bag fabric all in one go. And since I'm going to direct warp on a rigid heddle loom, I'm going to be weaving within an hour. So probably by next week, I will be able to show you what I've found out from this process.